The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, and welcome to webinar number 37. Today we'll be going over expense reports. My name is Wayne Barbaza, and I'll be presenting today. And again, joining me will be Mike Mello. Mike will be available to answer any questions that you may have. You can do so using the GoToMeeting panel. You can just use the question panel to post your questions. And if you don't get to ask them during the webinar, you can always post them on our forums. And afterwards, the recording of this webinar will also be posted on the website. So what we'll be going over today is going through the expense report setup. So there's a checklist that you'll see you can go through to set up preferences, your users and permissions, the category types, and payment methods. We'll go through adding an expense and creating an expense report. We'll go through the approval process and as well the processing of expense reports. So to get started, I've created a user called FSG Accountant that is a designated accountant for this company account, and I've given them access to the expense report accounting and admin's role as seen here. So from here, right away, you're taken to a checklist that you can go through that takes you through all the required setup screens that you have to go through before using the expense reports. So as you go through these, you can check them, and then you'll know that when you reach this part next time that you've completed certain steps. So we'll just go and start by going to the preferences. So here you can specify whether you want to allow your users to specify a customer for expense and whether to then specify if that expense is actually billable. You can also specify if you want to allow them to enter taxes, and as well if there is a missing receipt. So we'll just leave those unchecked for now. You can also specify a default starting and ending address when dealing with vehicle mileage expenses. And also from here you can set the default expense report name. Now the mapping and the expense report name can also be set by the individual users, so they can override these settings that you set for them. So once that's set, you can hit save. And then we'll go back to the dashboard, see what the next thing that we have to do is, and that's setting up users and permissions. So here, as you can see, I do have all the users that show up on the list. I haven't set up this new user that I have, Ron B. So what you can do is go into that user and start setting permissions. So here you'll see that you can specify a transaction type. So this has to be in line with the link that you make between a user and the corresponding entity that they are in QuickBooks, whether they are an employee or vendor. This has to be in line with that. So for this particular user, they're an employee. So I'm just going to specify that expenses go over as checks. And then I can say, I can override that setting here and say Ron's expense report. For the section below, this is where you would assign who this particular user, Ron B, is a manager of, or who is their manager. So that's used to allow certain people to approve the expenses. So Ron is not going to be managing anyone else, but the manager for Ron B will be FSG manager, so we can specify that here. So we can say Ron B, and then we can specify the manager. And we can save and close. So now we see here that Ron B's manager is FSG manager. We can close this. And you can see if I go into the manager's settings, I've previously done this, but you can see all the users that I've set to report to FSG manager. And as well, I've made it so that the accountant as well as the manager themselves can approve their own. I'm not sure if you would want to do that, but that's how I have it set up. And you can specify that here. So once that's done, we're ready to go into the category types. So I'll just go over here to the tab link. That's where it would take us. You'll see that I have 2 category types already set. And what this allows you to do is link a particular category to an account which is in QuickBooks, so that your users don't have to know what these expense accounts are. They would just simply have to see what the name is and choose accordingly. So we'll create another category type here called stationery. And we'll just add a description. And what these checkboxes here are for, if you want to allow the user to specify whether it's an amount or a rate, you can allow them to do that by enabling these checkboxes. Now, if they are disabled, it's most likely that you do have a set amount. A good example of that would be if you have, say, vehicle, you're creating a vehicle mileage type, you would leave this unchecked, but you would specify a rate here of, say, for example, 20 cents. If it's 20 cents per kilometer that you would be reimbursing. If that's a set amount, you can set that here. So here we'll just say we'll allow an expense amount, so they can enter in whatever they spent. And what this checkbox here is, or drop down is used for, is to specify the entry screen. So most cases you would be, unless you're doing a vehicle type category, then you would be choosing cash credit card. Mileage would just enable extra fields to be displayed when you select a vehicle type category or payment method. So for this one, we're going to specify cash credit card. And we can link it to a class if we like. And we can just choose an expense account. And this last field here would only be used if these transactions are going over as journal entries. So for the most part, you probably wouldn't be touching this, but to get more info on that, you can even just click on this YouTube link here, which we provided. So this YouTube link here was a 5-minute video that would go over just the addition of category types. So you can have a look at that for a refresher. So here we've added our 3rd type of category. I can go back to the dashboard. Now let's set up payment methods. New payment method. So here's where you can indicate how the user actually paid for their whatever they may be getting reimbursed for or submitting as an expense. So we don't have a payment method to indicate Ron's company visa. Ron's company issued visa. And we can say it's a credit card company. Is it reimbursable? We'll say no because it's a company card and it's assigned to a particular user, so that only Ron can select that. And we can select that here. And from here, we'll see that he doesn't have an actual credit card account. And I'll just go ahead and change this to Amex so that I could use one of the accounts. And if I don't already have it, I can do an add new. So I can go Ron's Amex sub-account of American Express and save and close. So now I'll be able to select that one. So that'll all sync to QuickBooks, obviously. And we'll go save and close. So now we have Ron's company Amex as a payment method here. And they don't actually have to be all assigned to a particular user. For an example, that would be cash payment here. So that one, as you can see, is not assigned to a particular user. So after that, we're done all our set of tasks here. So we can jump over now and use the expense report app as a user. So we'll jump to here. And again, there is a Getting Started tab, which will kind of guide you through and take you through the different steps and show you the different kind of in order screens that you have to go through. There's a dashboard where you can view charts of the expenses by status or by percentage breakdown. And I'll go back to that later. But we'll go to the expenses screen here and create a new expense. So let's say we had an on-site visit, and we're going to charge some business travel. So we could say personal car. And I'm logged in here as myself, Wayne, so that's why I'm seeing these options. And from here, what will happen is we'll eventually allow you to use Google Maps to calculate the distance. So if you have a start and ending address, that'll automatically calculate and give you your total mileage. But for now, you can just type in the mileage here, and that'll calculate an amount. So here you have some options if you want to do some spell check for the comments. But for now, we'll just save and close. So that gives us our first expense. We'll just quickly add another one here. Lunch meeting, and we can specify an amount. And and the payment method was cash. And it automatically sets the reimbursable checkbox to enable because that's what we set it in the preferences. And we'll save and close. So from here, we now have a couple expenses, and we can go to the expense report tab and create a report to submit now. So as you can see, the grid, there's no current expense reports or no expenses in this report, so we will add them here. So you can select as many as we like to add to this particular report. If I wanted to, I can add new expenses from here as well, but I just want to add these selected ones to this report and close this window. And from here, you can see that you can just submit the report. And we'll go OK. So now here I'll see, because my filter was set to not submitted, I'm not seeing it in this grid anymore, but if I just want to look back at it, I can get a view of my reports. I see that I have one processed in the past, and there's that one I just created that's pending. So now we'll move to one thing I could show you while we're here. This is the screen where I was talking about you can override the settings that are in those preferences that the accounting and admin set. So if you wanted to create your own default name here, you can do that here, as well as your starting and ending address. So if I wanted to call my expenses Wayne's expense reports, I can do that here instead of having it called my expense reports. So now we'll jump over to the manager's login and approve a report. So we'll go to the Approve Expenses tab and refresh. So here's that report that was just created by user Wayne. I'm logged into here now as FSG Manager. So I can pull up that report. And you'll notice one thing I can point out is here when I'm viewing my expense, I won't be allowed to actually approve the report, as you can see, because I don't have permissions. This is all based on those user settings that we went through earlier. So now if we go back to the manager's login, you'll see that once you're fine with all the expenses here, you can actually go through and approve the report. That'll remove it from this grid based on this filter. So now back as the accounting, on the accounting side, that expense will now show up as an expense report that can be processed. So if you just refresh that, we'll see that one. So they did have one that was still pending, and there's this one that I just created here. So now FSG accountant can go in they'll see if manager has made any comments, and they can look through it. They can spell check and process the report. Oops, I just have to select a bank account here, and that'll send it over to QuickBooks. So with all the screens here as well, you'll notice that there are these help links which you can read through. And as I pointed out earlier, there are also those YouTube links on the category and payment screens where you can get like a really short refresher on how that particular area works. One other thing I wanted to show you was how you can skip over the expenses screen and go right to the expense reports. So if I was creating an expense report here, as I mentioned earlier, when you're adding expenses, you can add them on the spot from here rather than having to go to the expense report. So if I quickly wanted to create an expense here, I can see it here as one that will be created, and I can select it right away to add to the report. So that's a quick way of getting expenses into a report without having to separately go into the expenses tab. Okay. So I was mentioning earlier, areas to remember where you can set your own preferences are the My User settings. And as well, to get a high-level view in chart form of all your expenses, there's different charts that you can view in the dashboard, various roles. So we can go to that. So here are out-of-the-box charts that we have to show per user, and status, the expenses. And back here, as I was saying earlier, in the My User settings, you can override the expense report name and the starting and ending address. And other charts. So here, based on my user, I can see my own expense reports by status as well as a percentage breakdown. So again, this webinar will be available on the website shortly. And if you weren't able to ask Mike any questions during this webinar, you can always post them on the forum and we'll address them there. So that covers the expense reports. Thanks for attending, and we'll see you soon. Take care.